The up and down value movements of sports cards are very often, aka usually, not logical. And though sometimes a player's great play in their sport can cause their values to increase, just as often a player's great play will be completely overlooked by the hobby and will not cause any movement in the card's value at all. I think that very often this is due to the values of sports cards frequently reflecting a casual fan's understanding of the sport, much more so than it reflects the understanding of someone who has a deeper knowledge of the sport. And this is something sports fans who also collect sports cards should be keenly aware of when thinking about possible plays. Hype is weird. Sometimes a player enters the hype train for reasons that have nothing to do with their play on the court, or field, or pitch, or diamond, and sometimes players don't enter the hype train space despite their excellent play. And very often, who makes the hype train cut and who doesn't reflects where a sport's casual fans are focusing their attention. A phenomenal player who is on an unexciting team or in a small market that gets very little media attention, or who is overshadowed by some other superstar on his team, can play amazing and not be noticed much by the hobby. He can have cards that see no value changes that reflect the way he is playing the game, while a different player who's in a position maybe due to being on a team that gets a lot of media attention, or maybe because of who his teammates happen to be, or maybe because of the explosive, exciting, or unique way he plays the game, or maybe because of the unexpectedness of his great play, or something along these lines, he gets a lot of focus. And this can cause his cards to spike more significantly, even if his play isn't as good as some of the guys getting no attention. Hype is psychological. When someone enters the hype train space, what becomes more important than their play is the nature of the conversations that others are having about them. That is the stuff that enters the minds of many sports card hobbyists, and those are the narratives that cause values to change over time, not including macroeconomic factors here. A player could be playing exactly the same way that they have been playing for months, but if the media begins to start talking about their future potential over and over again for whatever reason, suddenly that narrative enters people's minds and the card value can go up. The exact opposite can happen as well. It may not be logical, but it happens a lot. The reason I'm saying all of this is because sometimes being overly knowledgeable about the happenings in a sport can actually be a barrier to making good decisions in the sports card market. Now, this is not a blanket statement. This is not a 100% always true statement. There are absolute exceptions to this statement, but it is something to keep in mind when making sports card decisions in general. For example, I've made videos in the past about NBA players who I think are undervalued by the sports card market in relation to how their cards don't reflect the quality of their play. But when I have made those videos, I've had to be very clear that it doesn't mean I think those players' cards will increase or that I think they're good buys or something. Just because Jaren Jackson Jr.'s cards or Mikal Bridges' cards or Drew Holiday's cards I feel are way undervalued in comparison to how good of a player they actually are, that doesn't mean I'm going to go out and buy their cards. Although I do sometimes buy Drew's cards just for my PC since he's one of my favorite players. In fact, I would be incredibly surprised if any of those guys' cards ever truly reflect how good they really are. I don't think they're good players to get in on from a sports card investment angle. And the reason I think that is because I don't think they are the types of players that are going to get the hype spikes that cause them to become center in the minds of the casual fan. And for a card to spike like that, it really has to be a player that will be able to become more central to a casual fan's focus. Jordan Poole can have a spike like he's had due to the fact that he's on the Warriors, that he's offensive minded, that he has an exciting style of play, and that the level of his play is largely unexpected. That being said, if I was personally building a basketball team, I'd much rather have Drew Holiday on my team. I think he's more central to winning basketball, but Poole is more likely the kind of player in the kind of situation that allows him to connect deeper in the minds of casual fans. And that makes his cards have a much higher ceiling potential, especially for the short term. That being said, and just as a side note here, I don't necessarily think Poole's cards spike will sustain, just because spikes rarely do. I mean, look at how cheap Tyler Hero's cards are now, despite his excellent play. He had his spike already, his spike went back down, and now it's hard for it to ever go back up again. I completely expect Poole to have a similar trajectory. I could be totally wrong, maybe he really is the next Steph Curry, I think he's a great player, but that's all beside the point here. The main idea I'm wanting to express is that the reason for card value spikes very often has to do with the narrative that enters the conversation around a player, and that those conversations enter the discussion spaces of the casual fan. That is when momentum can happen on a player and his cards can spike in price. In football as well, this is also just as much the case. If you have a lot of really strong football knowledge, there may be some possible small plays here and there in some of the fringes, but those are rarer. Well, I say fringes, but really when it comes to football cards, every person who isn't a quarterback ends up being on the fringes of the hobby, which I personally think is really unfortunate. But I would suggest that the main reason the football card market is really so QB heavy is because that is where the casual fans put their focus. A football team is too full of too many positions that a casual fan just doesn't pay much attention to. So to a casual fan like myself, I can watch a QB, I can get a sense for how good he is. I can't really tell that about a lineman or a linebacker. Even with a wide receiver, the camera is focusing on the QB up until the wide receiver makes that catch. So unless it was a spectacularly difficult catch or a good amount of replay work is focusing on like the receiver's footwork or something, the camera makes it seem like it was really the QB who was the one doing the excellent work, and the receiver just happened to be the person on the other side of that excellence. The QB is at the center of everything. Now, I know logically that's not the reality of the situation. I mean, the QB's offensive line and how well that receiver was able to get some space away from the defense makes all the difference in the world to that play, 99.9% of the time. But to the casual fan's eye and to the camera, it's the QB that gets the glory, and that is how it enters the narrative space, and that is what affects card values. As such, having deeper knowledge about a lot of different elements of that team doesn't necessarily help people to navigate the sports card market too much. Again, not a completely blanket statement, and there are always exceptions to that. And I have known of people who can make some little moves here and there on the fringes and pull in a little profit for it here and there, but it's little moves and small plays that are the possibilities on the fringes. I think baseball is similar in many ways, although the exceptions in this space I feel are a little bit wider. I think that within the realm of minor league player prospecting, there's a lot more room for deep knowledge of this sport to help you find those excellent players before they enter more people's awareness. But outside of minor league prospecting, I think the values of cards for established major league players reflect a casual fan's sports knowledge much more so than a deeply knowledgeable baseball nerd. Now, saying all this, I'm not suggesting that you dumb your sports card knowledge down or something if you want to make good decisions with sports knowledge. Instead, the way I look at it is you have to be able to see the market from perspectives outside of just your own, or outside of just those who are more deeply engaged with the sport. When analyzing potential plays, you should be able to see it through the eyes of a casual fan, and be able to clearly see the difference between recognizing undervalued cards in relation to the sport and recognizing undervalued cards in relation to the sports card market. Those are two completely different things.